I think maybe one more point on the board for agreements. Maybe you guys would agree. There's also this very interesting dynamic. I would say this is a minor one relative to everything else. It's probably 5% of the problem. I think it'd be more fun to talk about the real problem. But there is a fun kind of, as an aside, there's a fun dynamic where, you know, you go to an engineering team classically for the past, and Stephen, you can take us back in history on this one. And one of like the easiest ways to stall a project was just getting the architecture, kind of the fights on, what language to use, what architecture path to go down. That could take months and months to kind of work through as your teams work through that. Yeah. Because of the pace of change in AI, you actually have this incredible dynamic where the labs, are obviously leapfrogging each other so frequently, but with not the exact same paradigm of how you should deploy agents and how they will work. And is the agent harness in the computer? Is it outside the computer? Do you run it in your cloud? Is it hosted? What tools does it have access to? Like, we are like, this is not a point where these are completely fungible technologies. And so that actually creates a bit of paralysis, because now as an enterprise architecture team in the real world, you're like, man, like what horse do I want to, kind of get behind, and which architecture path do I want to get behind? Because I've been burned by doing the wrong thing in AI maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I went down some path that now is deprecated or not the right strategy anymore. So to some extent, the speed of our change in tech actually reduces the ability for the tech to get diffused into the really, really important workflows, because now you have a lot of paralysis in just making decisions. So I actually think it's kind of fine, because there's still so much upgrade work people need to do in their infrastructure and their systems and their data. But this is kind of an interesting dynamic where I'll go have conversations with CIOs and their AI teams, and I'll say, hey, what are you using for your chat system or your core agent orchestration? And they'll say, yeah, we're in the middle of a debate between these 2 or 3 paradigms.
Right,
and it's and you hear that across almost every single customer, because there is a little bit of a nervousness of like, who do you get in bed with, and how much do you sort of, fully lock yourself into one particular path? And we also know that if you don't lock yourself into a path, it's always then you're building for this sort of duality, which is, also takes a lot of work architecturally.